In this video, I'm going to show you a guide to vastly improving your art in a systematic, straightforward approach. And I'm going to be using this guide to see what a clearly laid out system can do for my art over the next 4 weeks. The aim of this program is really to progressively increase the difficulty within drawing and improve our art over time by focusing on the basics and slowly building up upon them. One thing I want to point out before we get started is there's a few resources down below in the description which you may want to save at some point, or you could save this video for later as they may be helpful in the coming weeks. Okay, first things first, we're going to need to create a baseline. Be honest, when was the last time you actually made like portfolio quality art? Probably not in a while. And this is going to serve as a benchmark to view our progress throughout the weeks. If we have something clearly defined as where we are, then we know how much we improved over time and we can measure our results. Now, for this baseline drawing, you should only be spending double what you could do in a day consistently. So if you can do an hour and a half a day, you should be spending approximately 3 hours on this piece. This is just to keep the comparisons a little bit more accurate, right? If you put 8 hours into a drawing versus one you only put 3 hours in, not that the 8-hour one is necessarily going to be better, but it's going to have a higher level of detail. For me, I found 1.5 hours a day is going to be something I can consistently do, and it's not really going to interfere with my life too much. Now, for these 4 weeks, I recommend you stick to the same medium, as it's going to be easier to compare results. That's the basic theme, is that we want this benchmark portfolio piece to be something that we can actually measure against, and we want to remove as many variables that are affecting it in one way or the other. Throughout these 4 weeks, I've laid out a 6-day on, 1-day off schedule, and this isn't because you need to rest for art as if it was like going to the gym, but I figure having one spare day is going to be your life happens day, you know? You're going out with friends, something comes up, you weren't expecting it. It's okay, you have 1 day a week where you don't have to worry about that. However, if you don't have something interfering with your schedule, I still recommend you just take the day off, smell the flowers, go outside, touch grass. So, for the first day of each week, we're going to focus specifically on gray values exclusively. This is extremely important because shading is how we convey depth, right? Now, when I say grayscale, if the specific medium you're working in is ink, for example, you would do hatching and line weight to show your grayscale. If it was pencils, you would render it out that way, or if you chose digital art, just do it with the paint tool. For me specifically, I wanted to work on my digital painting for these next 4 weeks, so that's what I chose to do. Now, throughout these 4 weeks, we're going to ask progressively more of you, right? So for the first week, we're going to ask you to do studies of simple shapes as well as a background in grayscale. So following the model of progressively increasing, the second week, we're going to ask you to use the Magic Poser app and draw a figure in grayscale. In week 3, we're adding on top of that by drawing a background and the figure, right? And for the final week, we're going to ask you to do a figure and a background, but this time we're expecting you to polish it a lot more, right? It should be a more finished product, more complete. Keep in mind, you're spending the same amount of time, right? So you should be getting slightly faster each week as you progressively increase the difficulty because you've already drawn the thing, right? For example, week 3, you're doing a figure and a background, right? You already did those in week 1 and 2. Now, I think this is a good time to talk about reference. It's important to remember that reference/studies is the fastest way to improve your art, and it would be pretty unwise for us not to take advantage during these 4 weeks where we're intending to grow, right? We're intending to improve our art. All of these exercises I'm expecting you to use reference for. This isn't about drawing from imagination, right? This is about actually improving your art. Now, it should be noted, you're not actually a slave to the reference, right? You don't have to make a one-to-one copy, right? For example, if you're using the Magic Poser app, I want you to apply your own figure to the reference you have on screen. Now, on the second day of each week, we're focusing on headshots, right? Week 1, we're doing a headshot in grayscale. What I'm doing to improve my rendering is following this guide by Marc Brunet. So what it will look like for progressively increasing the difficulty on my drawings, right, is starting off week 1, I'm doing line art and flat colors. Week 2, I'm adding some grayscale to the flat values, right? And then week 3, I'm adding some tint. Week 4, I'm adding reflections and highlights and just putting more polish to it. If you want more details on how I'm doing this specifically, the video is down below. Feel free to watch it after this. But after we're finished with our headshot day, we're going to be focusing one day specifically on anatomy only. This day isn't actually about creating finished artwork, right? We're not rendering, we're not really doing any level of polish whatsoever. What we're doing is a bunch of quick studies on a specific area of the body. So for week 1, we're going to be doing arms, which, oh, would you look at that? Conveniently, I have a video about drawing arms right here. But what we're going to be doing is taking a bunch of arms from a bunch of different angles, and in the same allotted time we spend on our daily drawings, we're just going to be doing studies the whole time. Week 2 is going to be upper torso, which I don't have a video on, but conveniently for you, I found a video by someone else that's, I think, is pretty useful. Week 3 is going to be the legs and the pelvis, which is the next video I'm working on, so by the time you get to that point, there should be a video on the channel. And in week 4, we're focusing specifically on hands and feet. I decided that it's a little repetitive to do hands for the entire day because it's a much smaller part of the body, and honestly, you should have some hand drawing experience already. So hands and feet is what we're focusing on for the final week. And that's going to bring us into day 4 of each week. This day is just about figures. What we're going to be doing is taking what we learned from the headshot and the anatomy section of the week and try and put it into practice, right? Notice you're getting the whole day for this, so feel free to go into a lot of detail. It's just a figure, right? You're not doing any background whatsoever, so you could really go at it. Days 5 and 6, which honestly are probably the most important days. Now, the reason I combine these 2 days is because you're working on one piece for both of these days, and the focus of these pieces are going to be composition, as well as perspective, and applying what we've done throughout the week. That's a common theme, right? Now, I've allocated 2 days for this because it's honestly a lot more intense, right? You're doing a full background. So honestly, these 2 days are great days if you want to actually add some pieces to your portfolio. This would be the time to do it, right? You're going to have a little bit more time to polish, right? So week 1, we're focusing on 1-point perspective as well as the rule of thirds. Now, I'm going to throw up an example of how you would apply the rule of thirds to your drawing as well as 1-point perspective super loosely. But as you can see here, I divided up a page into grids with the rule of thirds, and I'm having, let's say, a face on this focal point and then a secondary focal point in the background. And I'm using 1-point perspective, just drawing a room that these characters are going to be inside. So that's how you would do it. Week 2, we're going to be doing 2-point perspective, and what we're going to be doing is the golden ratio. Now, this should go without saying, but do not draw a pair of butt cheeks for this one, all right? Examples of applying the golden ratio in your art could be like having skyscrapers follow the golden ratio. Ultimately, these are your pieces, so you decide how you want to work that composition into the week. After week 2, we're going to move into week 3, which we're doing 3-point perspective. Truth be told, I don't think adding an extra perspective point necessarily makes a drawing better or worse, right? It's just a different way of creating the scene. However, we're doing 3-point perspective this week just so you get your hands on it if you haven't already. If you feel comfortable in 3-point perspective, which is pretty rare, then feel free to use 2-point perspective, but I recommend you do it at least one time during these 4 weeks. Now, on the final 2 days of the final week, we're going to be using a triangle composition. And the reason I chose this isn't specifically because a triangle composition is any harder than any other composition. I think this is just a very good composition in general, which is why I recommend it as your final one, just so you end off on a high note. But throughout all these composition days, feel free to use different compositions if you find them online. The whole point is trying to follow a composition, right? That's the exercise. Which one you choose isn't necessarily going to impact how much you improve. However, different compositions imply different things. So I recommend you look into it a little if you want to change up the compositions. Feel free to add to the drawing for a 3rd day if you want, but just keep in mind, if you record your progress after 2 days, it's a little bit easier to compare against your first drawing. Now, I'm actually going to be following this exact plan I just laid out for you guys because I want to improve in a specific area of art. Now, feel free to make adjustments to the plan as needed. Ultimately, your art is a product of which areas you decide to focus on, right? So, I hope you guys appreciate the amount of work that I put into this video. Feel free to subscribe, and with that said, peace out.